We have
Oh,
someone taking us to the hospital who is a Sri Lankan forest monk.
Oh,
So he's going to be chanting and praying for us too.
okay.
got it coming from all the yanas, right?
Oh, absolutely. Why
Trying to
not?
cover all the bases. Yes, sir.
Rock on.
Yeah.
All right. Good to see you, Zara. Good to see you, Kate. Kate T and Kate D.
Hmm?
Yeah.
That's what I
Do the
tried to do.
gallery.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. All right. Well, let's get started. There's probably a couple people. Here's Jackie. Hi, Jackie.
Hello.
So I sent the outline books to everybody. You probably won't get them for another couple days. And if you still need one of these, just let me know and I'll send it to you, either email or I can print. I have printed copies already. So we're going to do the story of the Buddha tonight, the brief story of the Buddha, which is a great story, something that we refer to many times during our talks. So if you have pencil and paper, it's always good to take some notes. So I'm really going to emphasize to everybody to take notes on these talks that we have because it's got to start sinking in. So tonight we'll just do a short refuge practice of recitation on page 5 and page 6. So I'll do it very quickly. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chonam la, Shangju badu dagni kapsuchi, Dagi jinsoki pe sonamgi, Drola penshir sangye jupasho. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem centam she dewadang dewe gurdang dempar jorchi. Dognal dang donal gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dognal me pe dewadang midra war jorchi. Nei ring chak dang ni dang dwell way tang nam la ne pa jorchi. Okay. So tonight, the story of Shakyamuni Buddha, whose name, his given name was Siddhartha, and the family name was Gautama. His father was a king in the northern part of India, which is now would be a part of Nepal, and his mother was from a nearby village, and she was visited in a dream by a white elephant with 6 tusks. That came to her in a dream and said that she was going to give birth to a very special being who is either going to be was going to be a great leader of people, men and women, either in a kingly way, in a royal way, or as a spiritual leader. And she kept this to herself. She didn't say anything to her husband, the king, but shortly thereafter, she became pregnant, and she indeed had a child. So the Buddha was a human being, just like us. He lived 2,600 years ago. So he was born into this royal family and was raised in the palace by the royal family and so on, and the attendants that were there and like that. So at the time, 2,600 years ago, it was common for the woman who is to have the child to return to her family, in whatever village that might have been, for the women there to help her have the child. And what would be the custom would be that she would go, and very many people would hold on to the branches of a sal tree, S-A-L. It's a small tree, and the branches are relatively close to the ground in the lower branches, and she would hold on and kind of squat down a little bit, and the women would help her to have this child in a normal childbirth that way. So she was on her way from the palace, from her husband's palace, down to her village, along with this entourage, this many people who were going with her attendants and so on, down to the village to be with her family. When they got part way down to a little village called Lumbini, and it's now in Nepal, but had been in northern India, and there she started having, unmistakable labor pains, and they tried to have a natural childbirth. And what happened was they did something. The story goes, the mythology of this, and we can't be sure because it was so long ago and things weren't written down as they are today, but they say that they made an incision in her side, and that the infant was born from this incision, that she didn't have a natural childbirth. The child was born from this incision. So, of course, with our modern minds, we think, well, was this a metaphor for a cesarean birth, or that's how they described it? Is that what happened? We really don't know, but that is what the story is. Nevertheless, the infant was born with the ability to be able to stand immediately, and to be able to speak, and to be able to take steps. So the story is that the infant Siddhartha Gautama, to be the Buddha, is born and takes 7 steps, and with each step, flowers spontaneously arose under his feet with each of these steps. And he raised his right hand and he declared that he was the greatest of all births, the greatest of all beings, and that he would help all beings to attain enlightenment, spiritual enlightenment, during his lifetime. So this is the story, this is the mythology of his birth. And then he took these 7 steps, the flowers come, and then he became a normal infant after that. And everyone, the attendants took care of him and so on like that. And there was a pond right there, and bathed him in the pond. And the mother was obviously taken care of and cleaned and so on. And that place is preserved today in Lumbini. You can go there, and it's considered to be one of the 4 major holy sites of Buddhism. is on pilgrimage to go to Lumbini and to see this place and so on. And it's quite amazing. I've been there, and they have a footstep that they say is one of the footsteps of the Buddha when he was an infant like that. So it's not clear if they proceeded down to the village of the mother as they had intended, or they went back to the palace. But assuming they went back to the palace, it's known that after 7 days, that the mother, her name was Mahadevi, passed away. She died. Of course, it's not clear how she died or why she died, but one could imagine that, the mortality of giving birth in those days was not very great, and that, there was infection, something like that, and she succumbed to the infection. So here is now this infant, and without its natural mother, but there was plenty of attendants that were there at the palace to take care of the infant and to make sure that it was fed properly and clothed properly and so on like that. So the father, the king, he wanted to know, well, who is this child? And it was the custom of the time, for someone of a royal background like that to be able to summon the wise men to come and to inspect the child and make a divination, a divinity reading of who this child is. So the wise men came and they examined the child and so on, and they declared that this child was going to be a great leader of beings, and was either going to be a great royal leader, a king, a warrior, or it was going to be a great spiritual leader. And the king, being the person that he was, said, I need to have a successor to my kingdom here. So this child shall be a great leader of men, and as a warrior and as raised as a prince to inherit the kingdom and become the king. And that he let people know in the palace that he was to be protected from any kind of suffering, and that he was not to be encouraged in any way to go into any kind of a spiritual way of life. So he wasn't taught anything about spirituality, but he did learn how to read and write, and he did learn how to do great martial arts of the time, riding horses and shooting bows and arrows and swordsmanship and so on like that. He was never to leave the palace. The palace, of course, was situated in this great big courtyard with walls around it and gates that led into the village that was outside of it and so on, and to the wilderness that would have been on the other side of the gates and different parts of the great walls. And he was never allowed to go out because the king couldn't really control what was happening outside of the gate, so to speak. But inside, no one was supposed to be ill. No one was supposed to be injured in any way. No one was supposed to get old in any way. And so when anybody that fell into those categories had to leave the palace yards. So the prince, Siddhartha was his name, and he was raised in this environment, and every one of his needs was anticipated and was graciously given to him and so on. And he was a great student of learning how to read and write, and he was a great student of the martial arts and horseback riding and so all these different things that a king and a warrior king would be expected to be able to be perfect in. So as he got older, and it was the custom in those days for children to get married at about 13 years old. It was a rite of passage because most people didn't live much beyond 30 years old. So when they entered into puberty, then this was a time for them to be starting families and so on. So as the custom, the king had this great festival that lasted for days on end and invited all the different aristocrats from all around northern India to come and bring their young daughters to meet Siddhartha so that he could select one to be his bride. So, so after days and days of the festival, no one had appealed to Siddhartha. But then finally, on the last day, this faraway aristocrat, this king, it wasn't said that he was a king himself, but he was an aristocrat, a noble person who brought his young daughter named Yasodhara and met Siddhartha, and they immediately had a relationship in that, they liked each other and they talked to each other and so on, and they declared that they would be married. So everybody was thrilled. This was wonderful. The king was really happy that there was a noble wedding that was going to happen with a noble young woman and so on from a noble family. So this was very, very good. And sometime after that, they were married in a great big festival that they would have again that would last for days. So they took residence in the palace of the king, and everybody was thrilled with that, the king especially. And but it was, sometime, after all the festivities, that Siddhartha returned to his training. So now he's a teenager, and he's stronger and able to do more things and so on. And the people that he would play with, or that he would do his exercises with, that he would learn to have debates with, and he would learn how to do the martial arts, and they would have their fights and so on, was with the attendants, their children, and with the other families, the royal families that were associated with the king in the palace and so on. So there was no lack of children who were his age to be able to compete with him in all these endeavors. And he was very successful. He was always the number one. He was always able to subdue the other children, and he was always able to be smarter than the other children and so on. And so everyone was proud of that this was going to be he was a wonderful prince and worthy of being the king in one day. So this continued through all his teenage years. And the unfortunate thing was that Yasodhara never became pregnant. So people, were concerned about that, but there was nothing that could be done, under the normal circumstances. Every one of the prince's needs were being met. He had many attendants, and they would always try and help him and do things for him and so on. Like I said, they anticipated all his needs, and so he lived in this lap of luxury, never leaving the palace grounds. But as he got older, as he got into his late teens, early 20, he wanted to know, well, what is on the other side of this palace? Why can't I go outside the palace gates? I want to understand what's going on out there. And so his father forbid him to go out, and at the penalty of death if anyone was to help him. So of course no one was willing to do that, but Siddhartha did have one particular attendant who was very faithful to him, and Siddhartha was able to convince him to guide him during the middle of the night when everyone was sleeping, to go out through one of the gates and go out to the village to see what it was like out there. So the attendant was very reluctant, but as I said, that Siddhartha was very convincing. So they did that. And they go out, and they didn't get too far past the gate when they come into the early part of the village, and they see all these people that are lying about on the road, on the side of the road, that appeared to be very, very, very ill, very sickly, very weak. And some of them had twisted limbs and contorted bodies and so on, and some were wailing with discomfort and so on. And Siddhartha said to the attendant, said, "Well, who are these people? What is this?" He said, "Oh, well, these people are sick. These people are ill. They have different diseases and so on. And some of them were born with these deformities, and some of them have injuries from fighting or from working, or something has happened to them, and their bones have broken and so on, and they haven't healed properly, and they're in great discomfort and crying." And Siddhartha said, "I've never seen anything like this." He said, "Well, of course." He says, "The king does not allow this to be in the palace. Anytime someone gets injured, anytime someone gets sick or something like that, they must immediately leave the palace and go outside. And these people, they congregate around the gates, so that at the end of the day, at the end of the meals, whenever there is food left over from the royal meals that they would have inside the palace, the food, the leftovers, were taken outside to these people so that they had something to eat, some nourishment. So they would congregate there." Well, Siddhartha was completely blown away by this, because he had never imagined anything like this. And he said to his attendant, he said, "Well, this couldn't happen to me." He said, "Oh, no." He said, "This could happen to you, because you are like all the rest of us, in that we are all human beings. You are a royal, you are a prince, and, everyone will do everything to protect you. But you are still, you can still get sick, you can still get injured, and you must be careful," and so on. So Siddhartha says, I'm just shocked at this, and let's go back to the palace. I just can't, I have to understand more about this and so on. And we'll keep this secret, but let's go back in. So they go back into the palace, and after some time, Siddhartha is thinking about this and hasn't said anything to anyone, and trying to understand, what this means to him. And after some period of time, we don't know exactly how long, but he gets up enough courage to think to himself, well, I want to go further out into the village, and I want to understand more about what is out there. So he goes back to his attendant and says, "I want to go back out." And the attendant says, "Oh, Siddhartha, we can't go out." He said, "We were very fortunate to go out this one time and not have anything happen to us. But if we go out again and get caught, the king is certainly going to have me killed, and this would be terrible for both of us. This would not be good. Please don't ask me to take you out there." He says, "Oh, don't worry, we'll be careful, and I need you to do this." And he convinced the attendant to take him out again. So this time they go out in the middle of the night like the first time, and they go right past all the injured and the sick people there, and they go through the village, and they see all the businesses and all the houses and so on that people live in the village, and the way they live and everything. And it was the middle of the night, so everybody was sleeping. It was very quiet and so on. And there wasn't much for him to experience except to see all of these buildings and so on. But they got to the far side of the village, and he sees all these people kind of moving about and so on. But these people all seem to be hunched over, and they all seem to have white gray hair, and they all seem to be walking with canes or with crutches or something. And they all seem to be talking to themselves. They all seem to be feeble in some way, something he had never seen before. He says to his attendant, well, who are these people? What are they doing? He says, oh, well, these are the old people. This is where all the old people go. He says, old? What do you mean old? He says, well, he says, we're born, we're very young, we're healthy and everything. But as we age, as time goes by, things begin to change. We get weaker in our bodies. We can't stand up as straight as we used to. Our legs and arms get weak, and we may have to walk with canes and with help to be able to move about and so on. And our hair loses its color. It changes into white or gray, and our skin gets more pale, and we don't look as healthy. Our skin starts to sag and so on. And these are all signs of aging. Prince Siddhartha says, well, I've never seen anything like this. He says, of course not. He says, the king, when someone gets old, you have to leave the palace. You can't remain in the palace during this time. Everybody in the palace must be young and youthful and healthy and so on. So anyone who gets old like this goes. So Siddhartha says, well, it's a good thing that this won't happen to me. He says, oh, no. He says, this happens to everyone. You are a human being. You may be a royal human being, but you will get old one day, and this will happen to you. So Siddhartha, again, had never seen this level of suffering, of getting old. He saw people being sick. He'd never seen any kind of suffering like this. Everybody in the palace is very happy and cheerful and joyous and pleasant to be with and so on. So he says, let's go back into the palace. I can't take this anymore. Let's go back in. And the attendant was very happy to go back with him, and we'll keep this secret. So they go back in, and some more time passes. And Siddhartha finally gets up enough courage to say, well, let's go out again. I want to see what else is happening out there in the countryside. I want to understand more about what it is to be outside the village and these people that get sick and how does this happen? I don't understand any of this. So he convinces the attendant again, but this time the attendant was really putting up. He says, we've been lucky these last 2 times. He says, and if the king finds out, he's not going to just punish me by killing me. He's going to chop off my head, and then he's going to stab me 1,000 times. He says, this will be terrible. This will be a terrible death. Please don't subject me to this, And Siddhartha says, I'll protect you. There won't be any problem. He says, you take me out and everything will be fine. So this time they go out and they have their horses. They have gallant, beautiful horses and beautiful saddles and beautiful, bridles and so on. And they're all encrusted with all kinds of beautiful gems, and they're wearing their wonderful robes and headdresses and so on. And the attendant, of course, has to be someone of worthiness. So he, in many ways, looks, like a royal prince himself. And the prince is, his regalia is just magnificent. So pridefully they go out through the gate, and they go through the village, and they go past the sick people, they go past the homes, they go past the old people, and they go all the way out. And now the sun is starting to come up. They've gone so far out, the sun is starting to come up, and they get to the hills, to the hill country, to the foothills of what is the Himalayas, because this is northern India, where Nepal is now, and the foothills of the Himalayas are out in the distance, and they can see this procession of people that are winding their way up these foothills. And there's much wailing, crying, and terrible sounds. And they see people that are in this procession. In the middle of this procession, they can see that there is this stretcher with what appears to be this human form that is all wrapped in white cotton that is being supported by these carriers of this stretcher, and they're making their way up this foothill. And Siddhartha says, well, what is this? What is going on here? Why are they wailing like that? What is that all about? And he says, well, this is a funeral procession. He says they are on their way up to the cremation, up to where the charnel ground, where they do the burials, where they do the sky offerings, where they do the cremations. He says, well, what are you talking about? He says, well, when someone dies, when they get sick, so sick that the life goes out of their body. When they get injured, so bad that the life goes out of their body. When they get old, so old that the life goes out of their body. And then all that left is this dead body that begins to smell really bad and deteriorate and be ugly and so on. And it has to be disposed of. So either they burn it, or they bury it, or they cut it up into pieces, and the birds and the animals come and they eat it. Something to dispose of the body in this way. And Siddhartha was just amazed. He says, it seems terrible. And these people are wailing, they're crying in such ways. He says, yes, well, this is their family members who they love and they cherish for all. There might be their father, their mother, their brother, their sister, their children, their friends and everything. And so there's a great loss, a great feeling of pain and so on that this person has passed away, this person has died. So they're feeling this sadness and expressing it in this way. So Siddhartha, his mind is just exploding. He says, well, this can't happen to me. He says, of course, you're a human being. This is what happens to people. This is, it happens to all people and so on. But we will do everything to protect you. We will do everything to keep you from dying and, a terrible death and so on. So Siddhartha was just amazed that this should happen and so on. And he says, well, I don't know what to think about this, but let's make our way back to the palace. And the attendant was very happy to do that. And they kind of swing around and they come to this forest. And the edge of the forest is just this woods, and the sun has come up now and they can see in between the trees, they can see into the woods, into the forest, and they hear this music coming from the woods. They hear dancing, or they hear singing, and they hear musical instruments being played, drums and flutes and so on, and horns being played, and he can see inside, between the trees, and he can see that they're dancing and so on, and such jubilation. He says, "Oh, this is wonderful. This is great. Who are these people?" And he says, "Oh, these are the ascetics." He says, ascetics, what are they? He says, well, these are people who have renounced worldly life. And they have gone into the woods, they have gone into the forest to meet their teachers, to learn how to live and die properly, to learn about spirituality. And Siddhartha says, well, what is that? He said, well, there are many people who think that, within ourselves there is this soul, there is this special body that is within us and so on. And they are learning about that and they meditate to experience this. And Siddhartha is looking at these beings and he sees that they're naked. And he sees that they have blue skin. He says, well, why aren't they wearing clothes? He said, well, like I said, they've given up all their worldly possessions. They don't need clothes. They have the warmth of their practices to keep them warm. He said, well, how do they have blue skin? He says, well, they go up to the cremation grounds, they go up to the burial grounds, and they take the the ashes, and they spread the ashes all over their body, and it gives them that blue-gray color like that. He says, "Oh, that's amazing." He says, how do they survive like this? He says, well, they have their guru, their teacher that they all go to, and they support the guru, and the guru gives them teachings and so on. They were dancing and singing, and Siddhartha says, well, this doesn't sound so bad to me. This sounds like a wonderful thing. And they're learning something about, who they are and about this spiritual quality about themselves that I've not heard anything about. So they're making their way around, and they finally get come back into the palace, and they get in without anybody seeing them. And Siddhartha now is thinking about all of this. So lo and behold, Yasodhara becomes pregnant. And everybody is so happy that now there's going to be a child. There's going to be, and they hope for a boy child, of course, that can be a future prince and a future king and so on. So the dynasty will continue. They were all thrilled with that. And so everything was all happy back in the palace. So time's going on. Yasodhara has a young boy, gives birth to a boy named Rahula is his name. And there's such jubilation. Everybody is thrilled. This is wonderful. And Siddhartha is just thinking to himself this whole time, he says, I don't understand all this suffering that those people were going through. And I don't understand, this jubilance that these people in the forest were having. And that I'm understanding that they have a teacher who teaches them something about this soul, the spirituality within them. Maybe there's something there that I need to understand more. I want to know what that is. So one night, Siddhartha is just kind of watching his wife Yasodhara and the baby Rahula in the same bed together sleeping. And he's looking at them and he's thinking to himself, he says, I got to find out what this is out there in the forest. If I stay here now, I'll be locked in here for the rest of my life. It's like a prison to me. It may be a wonderful prison. It's this great palace and so on, but there's something else that I need to know about. And if I don't go now, I may never, ever be able to go again. And I don't know what it's going to hold for me, what the future holds for me, but it's most important that I satisfy this yearning, that I understand what this is. So he goes to his attendant and he says, I want to go out. I want you to take me to the forest, and I'm going to go into the forest and become one of the ascetics. Oh, and the attendant is saying, oh, no, we can't do that. That he's certainly going to cut my head off this time. There's no way that I'm going to be able to survive this. He says, no, he says, I'm going to write a letter to the king explaining this is all my doing, and I won't even say that you were involved, so he won't know that you were helping me during all this time and everything, but I need to do this. I need to go. And he was able to convince him, and they get on their horses and they go out to the edge of the woods, and Siddhartha gets off his horse and he gives it to the attendant, says, you give this back to my father, and here are some of my garments and jewels, and I want you to have some of this, for the generosity that you have shown me, and I want you to give these other things to my wife and to my child so that they have these things to remember me by, and so on. And then Siddhartha takes out his sword, and as a symbol of his renunciation, he takes his royal ponytail. I don't know the name they have for that, but the royals would have this long ponytail. They would have a shaved head, or they might have hair on their head, but they would have this long ponytail, and he whacks it off and gives it to the to the attendant to give to his father and say, he's renounced the royal life. This is a pronouncement of his renouncement. So my goodness, so the attendant was suffering himself now. You know, he knew he was going to get in big trouble for all this, but it was obvious that Siddhartha was adamant about this, and he starts going off by himself back to the palace, and Siddhartha makes his way into the woods. So Siddhartha goes in, and the sun comes up, and he hears some singing and some dancing and instruments being played. And he makes his way and finds this group of ascetics. And says, "Oh," he says, "I've heard so much about you. I've seen you, and I would like to be part of who you are. I want to learn your ways. I want to learn what it is to have a master, and to learn about the spirit and so on." And they said, "Oh, that's wonderful. We would like to share with you." You know, that he didn't tell them who he was. They didn't know that he was Siddhartha or anything. He said, "But you have to meet the guru, and if the guru will accept you, then of course you'll be a brother to us, and we'll show you everything that we know." So they take him back to the guru, and the guru is this nice guy, you know, and he supplicates the guru and says, "Oh, I would like to be able to be one of your students, and I would like to learn all the things that you teach and everything. And I understand that you're a magnificent guru. So would you please accept me?" So the guru says, "That's fine. I will accept you. The terms of the agreement are this, that I will teach you everything I know, and you will carry my alms bowl, my bowl of food, the empty bowl, you will carry that into the village, and you will go and ask for food, for people to fill my bowl and bring the bowl back to me, and then I will eat. So this is what you will do for me. I will teach you." He says, "Okay, that sounds reasonable." And so now for a time, this is what they are doing. So Siddhartha becomes one of the renunciants, one of the ascetics, and is learning the songs and the dancing and the playing the instruments and so on from them. And he's also learning how to chant and how to pray and how to meditate from the guru. And he's teaching them about different things about spirituality and so on. So this is all working very nicely, but Siddhartha is not finding out. He's not understanding why we have this suffering, why those people get sick, why they get injured, why we get old, why we die, and why there is such suffering associated with all that. He's not learning that from the guru. And the guru says, "Well, I don't have a good answer for that." He says, "But there are other gurus deeper in the forest. Maybe one of them can help you more than I can." So Siddhartha thinks, "Oh, well, that's a reasonable suggestion. That's a good idea. Let me go find out." So he leaves and he goes deeper into the forest. He takes up with another group and another guru, the same kind of an arrangement with the alms bowl and so on. And he's learning new things. He's learning more about meditation and everything, but he's still not learning about the cause of suffering, why there is this suffering, why beings have this suffering. So after a period of time, he says, "I'm not being satisfied with this. I'm going to find another guru. I understand that there's more gurus deeper in the forest. I'm going to go find them." And he sets off by himself again and goes deeper and finds another guru who claims to have more power. And he stays with him for a time, and he's learning more and more about deeper meditation, but he's not learning about the cause of suffering. So after this long period of time now, Siddhartha thinks to himself, he says, "Well, I'm really not getting satisfied with this, but I think part of the answer here is that I have to discover this by myself. I have to go into my own meditation and discover this. And one of the things that they teach is the renunciation of the body. that we've given up all the clothes, we've given up all the worldly possessions, we've given up all the pleasures of the body, but we also have to give up the body itself. And that through death, that the revelation of suffering will come. So we have to stop eating, we have to stop taking care of ourselves, we have to give that up. He says, well, maybe that's what I need to do. So he has these friends amongst this group who he talks with, and they agree with him. And they say, well, we'd like to go with you. So Siddhartha declares that he's going to go, and they're going to go higher up into the foothills and find a place to have a long retreat, to go into the caves or to go underneath trees that offer protection and so on, and to meditate day and night until they attain an enlightenment, an awareness. So the Buddha is prophesized. They know about this Buddha, and the Buddha was the prophecy that when this enlightenment comes, that there will be this Buddha that will be able to teach all beings, the way of love and kindness and understanding and so on like that. So, this was on their minds. This is what they're searching for. So they leave. And they go and they have some food, they have some rice, they have some water with them. They go high up and so on in the foothills. They each find their tree or their cave, their protection, from the elements, and they resolve themselves to not come out until they attain enlightenment. So for 6 years, they remain in this state. And all the food that they brought with them, they managed. Maybe in the beginning, they were eating 1 bowl of rice a day. Then it became 1 bowl of rice a week. Then it became one grain of grain of rice a day. Then it became 1 grain of rice a week and so on, and 1 little bit of water a day and so on. So they were rationing themselves so they wouldn't have to leave their spot. And sometimes some people would come, the villagers would come and would bring them food and so on, but they were not leaving. They were staying where they were. So after 6 years, you can imagine that Siddhartha became nothing but skin and bones. All the fat off of his body was completely gone. And he just became this starving Buddha. You can see images, you can see statues that are called the starving Buddha of him being emaciated in this way and so on. He became so emaciated that he could barely sit up. He could barely think, concentrate on what it was that he was trying to do, and there was no way that he could meditate. He lost his power of meditation because he became so weak. So he thought to himself now, he says, this is not working. What am I going to do? I'm going to sit here until I die, and there's no awareness, there's no enlightenment, there's nothing here. I don't understand. This doesn't make sense to me. There's got to be more to this. This is not working. So he decides that he's going to leave after 6 years. And he starts going down and he passes his friends who have their hermitages, the places that they were staying, and they see him and they say, Siddhartha, where are you going? He says, I don't know. He says, but this is not working for me. I can barely walk. I can't think anymore. I can't sit up straight. I can't meditate. This is not working. And they say, oh, Siddhartha, we're so close. This is what we've been working for, that we shall give up the body. And then when we give up the body, then this enlightenment will come. We'll become Buddhas. He says, oh, no. He says, I don't think so. I don't believe that's true. So he says, I'm leaving. They say, oh, okay, we're going back. We're going to continue our meditation. He says, okay. So he goes down, and he goes down into the valley of this village, and this valley is filled with all these little stones, and these little stones are what's called a river wash. You know, in northern India, during the summertime come the monsoons, and these river washes turn into raging rivers that when the monsoons are over dry up, and then during the winter months and so on, they just become these dried up riverbeds. Very flat, filled with all these excuse me, small stones. Excuse me. So he's making his way across this river wash, this riverbed, when he sees this young girl who has some goats with her, and she apparently has some sacks of food or whatever, and she sees him and says, "Oh, you must be one of those yogis up there that we know are up there, who has come down. This is wonderful. Let me offer you some food." So she offers him some yogurt, some rice, some milk from the goats and so on, and he accepts that, and he starts to eat, and he starts to get stronger, and he starts to feel better and so on. So this is wonderful, and she's so happy, and she leaves him, and she goes back to the village and tells the village, "Oh, I met this yogi who came down out of the hills, and he accepted food from me." And this was great. You know, the villagers hadn't heard of something like this and thought this was wonderful. And they all started coming to meet this yogi and offering him food. And all along this river bed are all these shrines that are still there, where these different families would come and would make offerings to Siddhartha to accept food and so on. So I've been there. I've been on pilgrimage, and I've seen what all this is, and it's quite incredible. And so he starts getting stronger. He's eating regularly, and he's feeling better. His senses come back, his awareness comes back, his intellectual ability comes back, and he starts feeling like, I can really meditate again and so on. So now he declares, he says, now I'm ready to start my meditation. And he finds this great big fig tree, got a big broad trunk and great big leaves and so on, and figs grow on it. And he says, this will protect me. I'm going to sit under this tree until I attain enlightenment. I'm going to start tonight, and I'm going to attain enlightenment tonight, he declares. So he does. When the sun starts going down, he makes himself comfortable at the base of this tree, and he goes into his practice. He goes into a samadhi, into a deep meditation, and he's there until the sun goes down, and he's very, very satisfied and so on, and very quiet. And then all of a sudden, this demon arises up in front of Siddhartha. And this demon, very powerful, great voice, says to Siddhartha, says, why are you sitting here, Siddhartha? He says, you can be a great king. You can be a great leader of men. You were born to this. You were born to be a king. And I can show you, I can teach you all that you need to know. You follow me. You give reverence to me, and I will show you what it is to be a great king. We can go back to your father's palace. He has been waiting for you, and your family is waiting for you, and you need me to help you to do this. And Siddhartha thinks to himself, oh my goodness, he says, I know what that is. I know all the treachery and all the deals that they make in the palace, and so when all the royals are all conniving, to be better than each other and to serve the favor of the king and everything. He says, I know all about all those deals that they make and all those arrangements and everything. He says, and I know that it creates all this confusion and delusion in people's minds and so on. He says, no, he says, I'm not interested in that. He says, I'm looking for enlightenment. He says, you get behind me, demon. And the demon just disappears. Siddhartha says, oh, okay, good. He goes back into his meditation. And he goes deeper now than he was before. And he's sitting there for quite some time during the nighttime, when all of a sudden another demon arises up in front of him. And this demon is so powerful. This demon has fire coming out of his eyes and coming out of his mouth and coming out of his nose and lightning coming out of his fingers and great power and great strength and everything. And he says to Siddhartha, he says, why are you sitting here? Why are you doing this? He says, you are a great warrior. You come with me. I will take you back to the palace, and you will become the greatest warrior that the palace has ever known. And you will conquer all the people, all the other kingdoms all around, and you will have so many people following you. And you will have all these lands as your riches, as your subjects, and so on. All you need to come and follow me, and I will show you how to do this. Siddhartha thinks to himself, well, he says, I remember when it was I was back in the palace, and I remember when I was a teenager, and I remember fighting my friends and the attendants' children and my cousins and so on, and how I would have to subdue them with the martial arts and with the knives and with the swords and so on. And sometimes I know I would hurt them, and sometimes they would cry out and get injured. And I saw those injured people outside of the village gate and how they must have been injured and so on. And no, I don't want that. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for enlightenment. I'm looking for peace. He says, oh, no. He says, no, I'm not interested in that. You get behind me. I'm going for enlightenment. And like that, once again, that demon disappears. And Siddhartha says, now peace. He goes back into his meditation, now deeper than he's ever been before. And he's sitting there for quite some time, when all of a sudden this other demon arises in front of him. And this demon has 4 bodies, beautiful bodies, young, beautiful women, voluptuous, dancing in front of the Siddhartha. Oh, Siddhartha, why are you sitting here wasting your time like this? You could be with us, having such great pleasures. We will show you pleasures that you never imagined. We will share with you everything that we have, and you will just be so blissful, so enraptured in the beauty of our being together. Why are you sitting here? Siddhartha thinks to himself. He says, I remember being back in the palace, and I remember having all my beautiful attendants taking care of me in every way that was ever imaginable. Things that I never thought of, they thought of. And how I was so happy with this and so wonderful. But at the same time, they were fighting among themselves. Who would be with me tonight? Who would be the one to show me great pleasure? And I saw their jealousies, and I saw their envies of who was with me and so on. And I saw their infighting and everything. And this was not something that I wanted for myself. No, this is not what I want. He says, no, I'm not looking for this. I'm looking for enlightenment. You get behind me. And once again, they disappear. And Siddhartha goes back into his meditation. Now, much deeper than he was before, much, much deeper than he's ever been before. And he goes into this where he sees all the lifetimes of all beings, of all time. Time becomes immeasurable. There is no time. There is no place. He sees everything that he has ever imagined is all here in one place at one time while he's in his meditation. He sees the many different lifetimes that he has had, that others have had. He sees the lifetimes that they have now, the different ways in which they live. And he sees all the future. He sees all the different beings of the future, all here now, all within this meditation. And he realizes that this is his true nature. This is his mind. This is his true mind. He recognizes this as being the enlightenment. He recognizes this as being what he has been searching for, this bliss, this all-knowing, this peacefulness, this quietude among all these possibilities. But all these possibilities are just fabrications of imagination, of things that come about from just thinking about these things. And he sees that being human being is just a temporary expression of this true nature. So by this time, the sun starts coming up and his eyes open up and he's looking around and he's seeing everything all around him in ways that he had never seen clarity before. He had never understood all this that he has seen before, all this temporary nature as part of just this imagination, of all this display, of all this understanding, of this love, of this true nature that was indescribable. There was no way that he could describe this. He could barely understand it himself. He knew that he experienced it, but to try and be able to give words to it, there were no words for it. He gets up and he begins walking about. And he begins walking out in front of the tree. And he's just kind of pacing up and down, just thinking, just letting his mind, he's not even thinking, he's just being at peace. He's just in this blissful moment because that which he experienced during the nighttime in that samadhi now has stayed with him. It didn't go away. His eyes are open. He's able to move about, but thoughts are just coming and going, but he's not settling on any of these thoughts. And he's pacing up and down. And then with each one of his footsteps, flowers come. Every time he takes a footstep, flowers come. And there's this long walkway that is in Bodh Gaya. This is where this all happened in northern India. Bodh Gaya. I've been there. I've seen it. And there is this long walkway that has been carved in stone now to symbolize this pacing back and forth of Siddhartha and these flowers coming up. And as he's doing this, his friends from up above come down and see him. And they say, Siddhartha, we see you. What has changed? Look at you. You have a golden body. Your body is radiant. You look healthy and strong. What has happened? He says, I have reached the Buddhahood. And they say, oh, show us how to do it. Well, tell us what it is. Tell us, this is wonderful. How did you do it and everything? What's it like? He says, I don't know what to tell you. He says, it's beyond my ability to be able to tell you. I don't know what to say. But you begin to eat, get strong. And the village people are coming and they're saying these 5 friends and they're bringing food to them as well as they did with Siddhartha, and they're getting stronger. And he's pacing up and down for 2 weeks. He paces up and down like this. And then The friends are eating and getting stronger and so on. And every day they're beseeching him, oh, Siddhartha, please tell us. And they're calling him the Buddha. Oh, Buddha, tell us, how did you do this? And he says, I don't know what to tell you. He was in this state of blissfulness, of clarity, of unimpededness that is non-conceptual, has no words for it. So after 2 weeks, he just starts walking towards the west because he knows that that's where the city Varanasi is. And Varanasi is on the banks of the Ganges River. And in India, it's known as the holiest place, the holiest city in India. And this is where all the Hindus want to go and to die and to at least be cremated, or if they don't have enough money to be cremated, to just have their bodies thrown into the river Ganges and to float down the river Ganges. So this is the holiest place. What better place can he go? So he starts walking. His 5 friends are following him, all the time beseeching him. He's walking down. He goes into Varanasi and just kind of keeps walking. There's nothing for him there. He says, nothing is connecting with me. I'm not connecting to anything here. I'm not feeling like I need this, And he keeps walking, and he walks right through the city of Varanasi and gets to the western suburb, to where this place called Sarnath and Deer Park. There's this great big meadow, and there's this woods that is around, and the deer live in these woods and come and they feed on the grass that grows in the meadow and so on. I've been there. And he finally gets there, and it takes him from the time that he first attained enlightenment till the time that he got to Sarnath was 49 days, 7 weeks. And he gets and he sits underneath of a tree, maybe a sal tree, much like the one that his mother held on to, to give birth to him. He sits underneath a sal tree, and he tells his friends to come and sit in a semicircle in front of him. And he says, I will now teach you the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And he begins to teach them the 4 truths. So this is the 4 turnings of the wheel of Dharma, the 4 truths. He says, all beings have suffering. It doesn't matter if they're young. It doesn't matter if they're old. It doesn't matter if they're rich. It doesn't matter if they're poor. It doesn't matter if they're a man. It doesn't matter if they're a woman. It doesn't matter what circumstances. All beings have suffering. It doesn't matter whether they're human. It doesn't whether they're animals. It doesn't matter whether they're insects. There are beings that we see. There are beings that are invisible to us. All have suffering. That's the first truth. The second truth is, what is the cause of that suffering? The cause of that suffering is desire, attachment, that which we want to have this life. We want to have this body. We want to have these things that we become so attached to that we lose our awareness of our true nature, of our peacefulness, of our bliss, of our awareness, of our unimpededness. And we give up those qualities for the sake of having these things. And also are the things that we don't like, the aversions that we have, that we have these hatreds, and they rob us of our peacefulness, of our bliss. And then the jealousies that we have, they rob us of our jealousies. The greedful pridefulness that we have, they rob us of our peacefulness. Our delusions that we create, the lies that we tell, and we begin to lead these lives, and we make up these stories about our lives, all rob us of our true nature. These are the cause of our suffering. That's the second truth. He says the third truth is that we must stop this. We must have a cessation of these attachments, of these aversions, of these jealousies, of these pridefulness, greediness, of these delusions. We must stop these things. We must cut these things off. We must renounce these things. If we renounce these things, we'll no longer have the causes for these things. We'll no longer have the sufferings for these. But the question becomes, how do we do that? He says, well, that's the fourth truth. The third truth was the cessation, that we have to stop doing this, the renunciation. The fourth truth is how we do that. And that becomes the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is a way of evaluating our life on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment basis, to be able to say, are we doing these things to be able to liberate ourselves, to keep ourselves free from these attachments, aversions, and so on? So this Eightfold Path is to have the right view. Number one, to have the right view. The right view is liberation. The right view is enlightenment, that it is possible, that we have it within ourselves, but we have blocked it up. But our true nature is to be free. That's right view. Very simple. Not complicated. We make it complicated with all the stuff that we block it up with. The second of the Eightfold Path is to have the right resolve to maintain the awareness of the liberation, of the freedom, and to keep ourselves on the path to be able to do that, which then becomes our protection from the things that come to us, the thoughts that come to us of our attachments, of our aversions, of our jealousies, of our pridefulness, and of our lies, of our delusions, to protect ourselves from that. If we have the right resolve not to do those things. So then the third thing is to have the right speech. The speech is the agent of the brain. What we say has to come from a thought from our brain. So our speech, if we always speak the truth, now we don't have to make up delusions. We don't have to make up lies. We don't have to make up rationalizations for why we have attachments, for why we have hates, for possessions, for greediness, and so on, for the lies we make, the pridefulness that we have, that I said, the jealousy, and so on. So if we always speak the truth, now there's no games that we have to play. And that comes when we don't know that we say we don't know. Because the problem becomes that instead of saying we don't know because we have pridefulness, we make up a story that we do know. And then we attach to that. And we have aversions to people who argue with us that it's not true or something. And you see all the dynamic things that begin to happen as we begin to take on these aversions and so on. So the third thing is to always speak the truth, the right speech. Always speak the truth. The fourth one is to have the right conduct, the right behavior, to always do good deeds, to always do good things for yourself, to always do good things for others, that we don't bring harm to others, we don't hurt others in any way, either physical or intellectual harm, in any way, shape, or form. We protect each other, we help each other, and so on. We don't. So it's through our behavior, through right conduct, do we maintain that right speech. Then, so that was number 4. Number 5 is to have the right livelihood, that we are social beings. We have to be among other beings. We have to have relationships. It's natural for us to do that. We're part of families and so on. And we have to have a right livelihood in those families. That maybe I have a particular ability to be able to do this and somebody else does that. So I do this for them, they do that for me. And we do different things. And maybe those things change over a period of time. When I'm a teenager, things may be this way, but as I get older into my 20s, things change a little bit more this way. And then things change when I get into my 30s and so on. So we see that we change, but it's normal to change, and that our relationship and our livelihood can change, and that doesn't have to be bad, but it has to be something that helps other beings, that it brings goodness to other beings, and that we share, and that what they're doing we accept, and that we maintain this society for ourselves. So have the right livelihood is number 5. Number 6 is to have the right effort in all this. That we are always moving ourselves forward in this change, that we're not letting ourselves get lazy. We're not letting ourselves just kind of plateau and just sit back and get lethargic and sleepy and so on. That we are always moving forward. We're always trying to learn new things. We're always trying to change in positive ways, and to accept that, and to help others to do the same thing. So we're putting forth the right effort to be moving forward, and not to be going backwards or not to be stagnating. So right effort. Then the 7th one is to have a right mindfulness, to be able to think, to be able to contemplate, to be able to see what we are doing and make conscious decisions about what is around us, what it is that we need to do, and how it is that we modulate ourselves along with all those different things that we need to do, and to help others to do the same thing. To be aware, to be mindful of what it is that we're doing, and to develop our intellect, to develop the skills and the talents and so on that we need to be able to grow and to be able to sustain ourselves, to be able to do that. So mindfulness is part of that, to increase our knowledge base. But mindfulness is also to develop and understand that we have this spiritual nature, that we have just not a physical body, that we have an intellectual body, and that we have a spiritual body. This was the realization that Siddhartha, the Buddha, had when he came and he strengthened his body, when he started eating the food that the villagers were bringing him before he went into enlightenment. He realized it then. He says, I have this physical body. I cannot take this physical body for granted. I have to support this physical body. If I support this physical body, it will support my brain. If I support my brain, it not only will support my body, but it also will support my spirituality, my ability to be able to meditate. And if I'm able to meditate, I'm able to see that there is something else beyond just me, that I am part of something else that is much greater than all of us. And within my body and within my brain, that all is made healthy. The body gives me the gift of the body. The intellect gives me the gift of contemplation, and the spirituality gives me the gift of life. So we see this. So this mindfulness, this right mindfulness, brings all this together. And this then becomes number 8, the right concentration. That we see that all this has all come together within ourselves. We become the temple. We become the body of wisdom. We become the expression of all this nature, this phenomenal nature that is beyond our conception, that we become all part of that. We become the concentration of that. We become the absorption of that. And we begin to abide in that, that it becomes a vital part of our everyday life. So this Eightfold Path, if we maintain awareness and stabilization of each of those eightfold things, we are able to maintain the cessation of attachment, aversion, delusion, jealousy, pridefulness, and envy of being a human being. That we see ourselves now as being a Buddha, an awakened one. So this is the Eightfold Path. This is the Eightfold Path, which is the fourth, which is the cause of cessation. So the four truths. So it's often called the Four Noble Truths, but it's been brought to our attention by our wonderful teachers that in Buddhism, in Sanskrit, it's known as the Four Truths. But somewhere along the line, the Western people stamped it with the Four Noble Truths. And that's wonderful, but it's giving an adjective, It's not enough to say the Four Truths. It's got to be the Four Noble Truths. But that's typical of human beings, isn't it? It always wants to be grander. That's part of the trap of being a human being, that we let ourselves get tangled up in. And what we're trying to do is to liberate ourselves from those entanglements. So the Buddha realized all this and said, I can't give you enlightenment. All I can do is show you the way that I attained enlightenment. And you can adapt that, use that in your life, and see if you can find enlightenment in your life. So 2,600 years ago, and how many millions of people have followed that advice, have done that? We can't count. It's immeasurable. We don't know. We know it's been it's been many, 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 many people. And we know that the truth of this, the essence of the truth of this is shared in so many other traditions that are Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism or Islam or the traditions that came out of China, the traditions that came out of Africa, the shamanic traditions and so on. The essence of these teachings is the same. So now the 5 disciples stay with Siddhartha. Now I'll call him the Buddha. And for the next 50 years, he was 35 years old or so, they say, when this came. And for the next 50 years or so, he traveled all around, of course, by foot, going through the woods and the villages and so on of northern India, teaching this over and over and over again. People were illiterate. At this time, it was all oral teachings. These teachings were done in the Sanskrit language. It wasn't a written language. They didn't have a written language for it. So it was repeated over and over again, not just by him, but by his disciples, who now became very many disciples. And they committed what he said to memory. And if you've known any of these very, very devout Buddhists, just like other traditions, they commit these things to memory. And they can recite books and books and books from memory. Because they practice them so much, and they become the embodiment of those. It just isn't just something a vicarious understanding of what this is. They become the embodiment. They become the gnosis, the knowledge, the knowing of these teachings and so on. So there's many stories about the Buddha's different teachings and so on, and we can talk about those. The lamas talk about them. I don't talk about them too much because that's the job of the lamas. But we can express them. We can talk about them. The Buddha lived to be about 84 years old. He ate some bad food, the story goes, in Kusinagar. in northern India, another village in India. And I've been there as part of the holy pilgrimage sites to go to. And it's very, very quiet. Oh, it was amazing, what this village was like. And he ate this bad food, and he knew he was going to die. He knew he was sick. He was not strong enough to be able to heal from the bad food that he ingested. And his disciples were, oh, Buddha, please don't go, please stay with us, teach us more, teach us more. And he said, I've taught you everything that I can teach you. It's up to you now to take these teachings, and you need to put them into practice in your own life. I've done as much as I can do. It's time for me to go. My body is giving out. But the spirit of who I am, that is immortal. And we are all part of that same spirit. We are all Buddha. So he laid on his right side with his head on his right hand like this, and his body completely straightened out, and his left arm on his right thigh. And this is the position that he passed in. And this is called the Reclining Buddha. And there's many statues to that. And then he was taken, when he passed, they took him to a burial ground, a cremation ground. They built a huge fire, of course. And then they took his relics. The relics are the fragments of bone and so on that are left in the ashes after a cremation. And they took those and they divided them up among his many disciples. So if you can imagine now, after 50 years of teaching, he had many disciples who had gone to many different lands in India and Southeast Asia, who all heard about this and all came back for this event. I mean, this was a huge event. So, and those relics were disseminated to many of these different people, and they then in turn took them to their homes and to their shrines, and they became enshrined in their altars and so on like that. There was a PBS special not too long ago, and I've actually got the film for it, where they had heard that there was a depository of relics that was in the base of this. They built this stupa, this building that is where the where the cremation was of the Buddha. And underneath of that were some of the relics that were left to stay there in India like that. And they did this very scientific archaeological dig to be able to recover these, and they were there. And so they put them back, but they wanted to, how human beings are, they had to prove it. They won't take nothing for granted, and the Buddha said, don't take anything I say for granted. Prove it for yourself. So there's nothing wrong with that. But that's human beings for you. So, so then for the next 200 years or so, the Dharma is the teaching of the Buddha. Dharma is a pathway. It is a Sanskrit word that means a pathway. So there's a Dharma to be a pathway for giving birth. There's a Dharma for being a carpenter. There's a Dharma for being a trash man. There's a Dharma for being a philosopher. There's all these different Dharmas that would be regarded as a lowercase d, but the uppercase D would mean the Dharma of the Buddha Dharma. And these were the teachings of the Buddha. So that time that he was pacing around during those weeks, those 49 days when he was traveling from Bodh to Sarnath, and he was thinking about what it started coming together, how he was going to express himself for the four teachings, for the four truths, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma for his 5 disciples. And he continued to meditate he continued to teach, and there were 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The first one was the Four Truths. The next one was the teaching of the Mahayana, the middle way. The next one was the teaching of the Tantra, the practices, the wisdom practices that he was teaching. So during the course of his life, he taught these things. And this is what we pay attention to. This is what we learn now. So this is a brief description of the birth of the Buddha, of the life of the Buddha. Does anybody have any questions or comments? All right, I'll pick on you. All right. Zara, what'd you think? Zara's not home. Okay, she's got her name up there, but she escaped. Okay, Jackie, how about you? What do you think of this?
Sorry, Lance, I was having trouble with my device, but I'm going to let her go now.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Jackie.
Okay, well, I had heard I've heard the story of Shakyamuni in the past, not quite in this level of detail, which is I found kind of interesting. And yeah, I mean, I'm more interested. Like, I didn't realize that the Eightfold Path was really the 4th of the truths and where the truths came from. So that I found quite interesting, and I'm looking forward into diving into more of that, which I'm guessing is coming down the pipeline.
Oh yes, absolutely. Well, good. You see, that's why we tell this story, and that's why we tell it the same way over and over again. And we've learned it this way over and over again. So everybody gets the right chronology, gets the right terminology, gets the right reference points, and so on like that. It's very important to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of little nuances that I've heard differently. Like, you hear things like, Siddhartha's wife was pregnant for 6 years, before she gave birth, and she gave birth the night he went off and he was supposedly, their son was conceived when he got enlightenment or something along those lines, and then his renunciation was when he was born. I don't know. I find a lot of that to be a little metaphorical.
Right.
Yeah, because I don't believe that a female is going to be pregnant for 6 years. It's just a long, long time.
There's a lot of practicality that we have to apply to this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of mythology, but we have to apply some common sense, understanding to that. So in the book, in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, which I've encouraged everybody to get, there is an annex, or a part of the, not even call it the annex, the appendix or whatever. There's a section in there where the story is written out. So you can refer back to that if you like.
I have it on order. I ordered it 2 weeks ago, and I've been watching it travel through about 35 different states. And I'm like, okay, the universe does not want me to have it just yet.
It'll come.
But it will come. And actually, the other thing I thought was interesting is I did not know that the Reclining Buddha was the pose of Siddhartha or Shakyamuni when he passed. I mean, I was in Cambodia several years ago, and there was a small town outside of Siem Reap where they said, this is the largest reclining Buddha statue in the world. And I didn't know that was the Buddha in his passing phase. Like I had no idea. So that was just kind of an interesting little.
And it's recommended that we use that pose to go to sleep by.
Okay, well, that's good. I'm a side sleeper.
Okay. All right, very good. Zara, how about you? What'd you think?
I think this is the third time I've heard, I think I've had the honor to hear you describe it like in the 101. And I mean, it's funny, like hearing the repetition is so helpful because you miss details. Well, I've missed details, I should say. I have missed details. I enjoy listening to um, the historical aspect of it and the process.
Is there
And
a particular part that you consider to be your favorite?
well, yeah, I think how you describe his sort of his incremental spiritual transcendence, like going through his different mentors and then realizing he had to do the work himself. I think that part of it is probably like that's like a light bulb moment for me where I recognize, and that's the work we have to do in ourselves.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Rebecca, how about you? You've heard this a couple times now, right? Or maybe is this the first time? You tell me.
I'm going to 3.
Well, you've heard this 3 times now. Oh,
Mhm.
good. Well, then you could probably tell the story yourself.
No, I don't think so. So I bought the Kindle edition, Jackie, and I had it immediately. And so I'm just now I'm scanning through the appendices trying to find it, and I'm not having any luck, but I'll do better next time.
Yeah, take a look. It's in the book. I can't guarantee that it's in the Kindle, but it's in the regular book.
I bought
Okay.
the Kindle edition of the book you recommended.
Yes, I
Yeah.
I understand. But
So I'm hoping it's identical to the print copy, but
yeah,
I'll rough somebody up if not.
I would hope so too. Let me see. So in the table of contents, it would be sorry, wait a minute.
See, that's about where I ended up. I mean, and I don't doubt you.
Well, maybe
sure
I'm
it's
wrong.
you.
You know, maybe I made a mistake, and because there is the brief account of Dharma Lord Gampopa's life, and maybe that's what I was thinking and confusing it with another book. So that may be what I've done. So forgive me on that.
Well, no worries. I took notes every time you've told the story, and so I did not take copious notes this time.
Okay.
Um,
Well, you know this is being recorded, so you can always
Hmm.
listen to it again if you like.
Come back and
so
take
forgive
copious
me,
notes then.
and I will. I must be confusing it with another text, so I will try and find that.
Now I'm sorry I said anything.
No, I'm glad you did, because you see, here I am going out and saying things that aren't true. So that's where it is a reciprocating arrangement that we have.
All right.
Thank you.
I
I
but
stand corrected.
oh God.
Good. Okay, let's move on.
But
Yes,
I enjoyed just being present for the telling of it this time.
good.
And interestingly, I'm feeling much better than I was an hour and a half ago.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. Yeah. Sitting in front of the TV doesn't do much for your health, I think. If that was your choice, if that was your choice. Huh?
I was going to go take a nap, but I'm glad I'm here.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay. Kate Treadwell, you got anything? What do you think? You've heard this many times, I know.
Yes, I've heard it from you. I've heard it from others. It did seem especially powerful tonight. I don't know if that was your telling or if it was something in me, but I really appreciate it. At FPMT, we're, at Guya Samaja, we're encouraged to see ourselves in the story of the Buddha. The first time I heard that, no, 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 no. He's such a brilliant man. You know, we're talking about him thousands of years later. I couldn't see myself in that. And then I started to. And I was thinking about that again tonight. So thinking to the point where he almost died of starvation. He couldn't meditate. He couldn't do anything. And he said, this isn't working. And that was another time. Okay, I've been through that. I got to the point where I couldn't meditate. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't make progress. This isn't working. And so, yeah, just seeing a little bit of myself in the story.
Well, good. Terrific. Thank you. Kate D, have you heard this story or have you read this story? What do you think of the story?
I have. I enjoy it every time I hear it. There's always something else I pick up from it. One of the little nuances is I've heard he took 8 steps instead of 7. But the
details.
oh, there. Yes, exactly. If I may piggyback off of what Kate T said, the relating to the story was the part where he was pacing back and forth, trying to find the words to describe what he came to realize. I can absolutely relate to trying to find words to explain how I feel or what I discovered or how I would interpret something. So thank you for sharing this, and I appreciated this class tonight.
Very good. Thank you. Michael, how about you? I know you've heard this a half a dozen times.
A half a dozen times just from you.
Yeah.
Many times previous. But yours is always the most cinematic telling. You know, I always laugh, I cry. I've been writing a soundtrack in my head for the longest time now. We should work together on it. I've got some basic guitar chords. Yeah, and some of the little stuff is interesting. We all sort of peg on it, which shows us that we're paying attention, and we tweak on different areas. And you know, I heard that when he was born, first an elephant came out of the right side of her stomach, and then he came out of the right side of her stomach, you know, like being hauled by the elephant's tail. And then he kind of took those steps and said, behold, I am the world honored one. And then everybody freaked out. But I mean, I love the story, and I agree. It could be a metaphor for how simple, how organic, or how natural it can be to become enlightened. How it can be human experience, and it can be painful, and one can start as an ignorant idiot, and in the same lifetime be a Buddha. So the lesson is there. As far as it being historically correct, we know there was a historical Buddha, and we know the places that the historical Buddha went. And there's, you know, there, and I think it's very real in very many senses, and legendary in several senses, but useful. And I agree. It's like a great epic. It can be told again and again and again, and we can always get something new out of it.
Thank you. Okay. Bonnie, how about you? Would you comment on the story? Okay, Bonnie, William has to find the switch. There you are.
Okay. Yeah, I enjoy hearing the story over and over again. I've heard it so many times, several times from you, several times many other places. but it's always such an enjoyable story to hear. There's so much that comes out from the story, and you do such a picturesque description of it. I really get a beautiful image as you're telling it. And I'm wondering, you talk about all these special places. Are you going to lead a pilgrimage to visit these places?
Well, I wouldn't be the one to lead it, but I would love to go again. It would be great to go with one of the Kempos or Drupan. You know, there's usually trips, you know, that you can sign on to, and if you can go in a small group of maybe 10 or 15 would be the best. You know, if you go with a
Yeah.
group with 30 people, it's that's a big crowd. That's tough. But if you wanted to go, there's opportunity to go. This past year, not too many people went because of COVID, but it would be great to go. Yes, it's a magnificent. It's a trip of a lifetime for sure.
Is that how you did it with one of the Kempos?
I went with Drupan Tinling Ningpo.
Oh,
So we went for 3 weeks, and
Beautiful.
it was incredible. So
I
I
bet
would
it
love to. I've actually made a DVD out of the snapshots that I took and threaded them together with music and so on in a chronological order, and it's very entertaining. You would enjoy. So if we have time sometime, we'll do that.
Oh, please do. I would love
Yeah.
to see that.
Yeah. William, what do you have any comment? What do you think?
Oh, I'm very, it's all of this is like, I don't know that the Buddha was a baby like he's been blown up to be. I think he was just a regular kid. Which,
I tend to agree with that. You know.
but I mean, they're good stories, and I can see with the numbers that are used, these, what would you call it, science of it. You know, there's a certain amount of numbers in the chakras, and there's a certain amount of numbers that he walked. There's a certain amount of this and that, and it's all there. It's all there.
Yep. Very good. Thank you. Tom, what did you think? I know you've heard this more than anybody, and what do you think?
You do such a wonderful job, Lance.
Well, thank you.
telling
I'm
the
not
story,
looking
really.
for compliments.
Really do. I mean, really, it really it's heart wrenching. But yeah, there's certain the one aspect of the Buddha story that really gets me is the part that when he realized this true nature, and for a moment, for a brief second, I guess, he contemplated into returning into parinirvana. But when he saw the true nature in everyone, every sentient being, then it was the same as his own true nature, that he decided to stay and to help every sentient being realize their true nature. You know, and that's
Well, it's interesting you recognize that.
That's without that, where would we be? You know.
Let me ask you all a question. How many lifetimes do you think the Buddha had?
A lot.
He said he had a large amount of lifetimes, like 600 or 700, something like that.
Well, why didn't he become Buddha in those times?
Probably because he messed up.
Well, who
Yeah.
said he,
You have to find out who
Karma.
you are by butting your head against the wall enough times to know that it's the wall sitting there. So you no matter how intelligent you are, which I believe that being intelligent is as detrimental to you as being ignorant, as far as mastering or becoming Buddha.
Yeah. Jackie, did you have a comment about that?
well, to me, I don't know that he didn't attain enlightenment in other lifetimes. This is just the one that was documented in this way. For all I know, Buddha could have been Jesus, or Buddha could have been, like, I don't know. I believe he probably had enlightenment in other lifetimes.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Yeah. One would say that in each of the different lifetimes that we all have, that we're going through, a progression of refinements or purifications. And that in the lifetime of Siddhartha Gautama, he had reached a level of purification that was ready for the three demons that he had that rose up, where he recognized those three demons as being the remainder of his purifications that had yet to be purified. And in that particular life, he purified them, and therefore he was able to recognize his true nature. So the first demon was the demon of ignorance. And the second demon was the demon of hatred. And the third demon was the demon of desire. So, there's many different ways, associations and, ways and looking at this. And and I think part of the study of this is to contemplate all those different things and relate them to ourselves and to other people, and this is how we exhaust all these possibilities and say, okay, well, there's something that is beyond all of this itself. There's this story that we tell ourselves, but there's still the reality of this that is incomprehensible by a human mind. We can only experience it. So thank you very much. Unless somebody has something else that you want to add to this, I'd like to recite the Medicine Buddha mantra. So does anybody else have any comment?
Yeah, I wanted to answer your question about how many lives do we think that the Buddha had prior to this enlightenment. I believe the closest thing to a true answer would be to say that the Buddha had all of our lives. I mean, in Vajrayana, we say that our every being has at one time been our mother. So I think the same thing can be said in reflection. You know, every sentient being has at one time been the Buddha, and the Buddha, the historical Buddha, had at one time been every sentient being once in their life stream. I like to think of it that way anyway.
I think that's really good. I agree with that. And likewise, we are every other being's life as well. And
That's kind of what I was going for, but you guys said it much better than I did.
yeah, but that's the transpersonal. You know, that's what we call the transpersonal. We see each other, in ourselves and each other. Very good. All right. Well, I know our good brother William is having a surgery tomorrow, so we're going to recite Medicine Buddha mantra for his quick recovery and for wisdom for his doctors and skillful means. So, if you have the text, we've got several different texts, but this is a specific Medicine Buddha. This is on page 9, but I'll recite it first in English and then in Sanskrit, Tibet. It says, I make my offerings to you, who destroyed the enemy of negative life cycle changes, who has thus gone to the state of enlightenment like other Buddhas, who perfectly accomplished the quality of the Buddha, the supreme physician who is fully liberated and awakened, the enlightened one, Medicine Buddha, Buddhoya, the pure land of the king of physicians. Medicine Buddha is the Buddha of healing. Om Namo Bhagavate, Begaze Guru, Badora, Prabha Rajaya, Tadagateya, Arhate Samayaksam Buddhaya, Teata, Om, Begaze, Maha Begaze, Raja Samugate Soha, 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 Teata Om 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 Begaze, Maha Begaze, Raja Samugate Soha. From Shanti Deva's 4-line prayer for healing. May every being ailing from disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed. Om Ah Hong, Om Ah Hong, Om Ah Hong. Okay, thank you all. We'll do a short dedication for tonight on if you have the prayer book.
Thank you all for saying all these wonderful prayers for me.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Hopefully they all come back to you in a wonderful way.
Well, may you heal quickly. The
One
Dharma
taste,
prayer. Beg pardon?
I was just saying one taste, William.
Yes. Page 20, the Dharma prayer. By the virtues collected in the 3 times, by myself and all beings in samsara and nirvana, and by the innate word of virtue, May I and all sentient beings quickly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious enlightenment. May the teachings of the great Trikampa Ratna Shri, who is omniscient, Lord of the Dharma, Master of interdependence, continue and increase through study, practice, contemplation, and meditation until the end of samsara. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable from the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. If anybody has any questions in the meantime, want to write them down, you can send them to me. Next week, we'll start with chapter 1 of the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. So sent those books to you. You should have them in plenty of time, I hope. And we're also going to talk about some of the prayers as we give explanation to them as well. So
Can I
we
ask
got-
a quick question, Lance?
Of course.
The medicine prayer that you did,
Yes.
was that in a different prayer book?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
So yeah, there's a number of books, and hopefully over the course of things, you'll want to have them all. Do you where do you live, Jackie?
Me? I live in
Yeah.
Arlington.
Oh, you're in Arlington, so you're not
Yeah.
so far away. So maybe you'll be able to join us at Dharma Surya Center when we finally get to go down there when we get open again. So there we have all the books, and we can make sure that you get what you need and everything.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Anybody else got anything? Okay. Thank you all very much. I sincerely thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Rebecca, I'm glad you're feeling better. Okay.